Hi, Matthew Holt, another THCB Spotlight here. I'm here with Rohan Ramakrishna and Vikram Bhaskran. I hope Vikram, I didn't butcher your name too much there. They are respectively the Chief Medical Officer and the CEO of Roon, which is a pretty new company, which just got funded late last year to essentially answer questions in healthcare. And I thought this is quite interesting. So, Rohan, you're a neurosurgeon, right?
Correct.
Practicing in New York
And brain tumor specialist. Yep.
and working on yes, because we can't be you can't be only as specialized as neurosurgeon. You have to be a particular type of neurosurgeon, right? And Vikram, you're just a tech guy, so you know you don't have that kind of medical specialty. But I wanted to for you guys to tell me a bit about why did you think that getting doctors to answer consumers and patients' questions was important, given AI and Google and Mayo Clinic and all these other things we've got online now. Why did you think there was a need and room for a company like Roon?
Amazing. Well,
Yep.
thank you so much, firstly, for having us. I can maybe kick off with the genesis of the idea from the side of someone navigating this as a non-doctor, and then Rohan will tell you a little bit about how he saw the problem from the perspective of a physician. And so for me, I was at Pinterest for many years, and at the time, my dad was diagnosed with ALS, and ALS is a rare neurodegenerative condition. My dad was in India, and we spent about 18 months trying to figure out what exactly he had. And like most families navigating something hard because of access issues to neurologists and experts, we went to the internet, and I think everyone does this. And we found the internet to be a very scary place. The biggest tech companies will take you down rabbit holes of misinformation, disinformation. You don't know what is true and what is not. And then if you're not in a Google kind of dystopian misinformation loop, you're spending time on online forums and Facebook groups, on TikTok and Instagram, trying to learn and trying to just understand, what this thing is. And so I found that process very stressful, underwhelming, and I had kind of a head scratching moment where I said, if we put so much stock, so much intellectual capital and physical capital into building amazing consumer experiences for shopping, for entertainment, like the company I worked at, Pinterest, why is it that for most of humanity, when you're navigating something hard, the best you have is Dr. Google, and or you're just in this infinite waiting game for a specialist or a doctor to get back to you. And so I felt we could do better, and I wanted to solve the problem, for the specific use case I had. And I let Rohan, and then Rohan and I came together, and Rohan had the same insight, but from a different vantage point.
Yeah. So thanks, Vikram. I think as a practicing neurosurgeon and brain tumor specialist, I just had this, consistent set of observations where my patients were being actively harmed by the internet. So much of the time as a patient, you're spent outside of the hospital, outside of the office. And so what do we do now we're in 2025, when we're by ourselves, faced with a new diagnosis or any new challenge in our life, we're often online. And those online sources for health include things like Dr. Google, which is 7% of health search, WebMD, Reddit groups, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And so many of those places are completely ridden with misinformation and disinformation. And I had many patients come to me and say, "Hey, I tried dog dewormer or even a little bleach, for my glioblastoma." And it's not that they were doing it out of ignorance. They were desperate, looking for answers. And I think when you're in some of these social media forums, there's no expert in the room, right? And so people out of desperation are trying these things and are preyed upon by scam artists. And we've talked to lots of Facebook moderators who run health groups, and they all say there's lots of people who literally try and prey on the people who are suffering with an illness to try and make a quick buck. And so we posed the question, what would it take to give everyone a free personalized guide for health powered by the knowledge of the world's best experts? available anytime, any place, 24/7. And so I thought that to do this well would require not just medical thinking, but amazing people from consumer technology. And so to really make something that resonates with the public at large. And so that's why Vikram and I and our other co-founder, Roon, partnered together to make Roon.
That's great. So I would say that the idea of can we sort of extract the knowledge that's been implanted into doctors over the generations, but obviously over their careers and make that more easily available to the public. It's been tried once or twice, and then you obviously have a lot of information. There are all the information services for doctors. I mean, think of Up to Date, and now a whole bunch of AI based tools trying to generate that information more quickly and easily to support clinicians in what they're doing. But we haven't really got to a great place. I mean, you really have, Mayo Clinic or whatever with their fairly generic articles about particular conditions, right? You don't have the sort of the in-depth stuff, and you don't have the particular information from named particular doctors the way that you guys are thinking about doing it. So I guess my question is, I know that a couple of companies have tried this in the past, going way back when Organized Wisdom in the sort of not even the 2010s, the 2000s was trying this. But I mean, why do you think this hasn't happened in the past? And how much of that is because doctors haven't had an easy way to do this, to sort of present themselves? How much has this been a supply problem, or maybe an institutional problem why doctors have been prevented by their institutions or something like that? What do you think's been going on with stuff? Why is it that you can find out anything you like in a Reddit forum, and you have to hope the other commentators are not just making jokes, but actually saying something sensible, but you haven't really had, access to the best minds from Columbia, Stanford, Northwest, whatever, Harvard.
Yeah.
Write your list down.
I think it's a great question, and it's really a why now question, right? And I think
Yeah.
I would answer it in multiple ways. One is that what we do at Roon is make it really easy for doctors to create. Most doctors don't go into medicine to become TikTok influencers or Instagram influencers, right? We go into medicine to take care of patients. And public and health education is part of the job. And I think that if the one aspect of medicine that every doctor, despite all its challenges, will say they still enjoy is that patient-doctor interaction, right? That's still fun. That part is still what makes people come back to work, despite all the rubbish we have to do on a regular basis, compliance work, all these infinite trainings that are to check a box, but you don't really learn anything. That part of medicine people could do without, but the patient-physician interaction is still what's special, and that's what we tap into when we create content on Roon. And so we make it super easy for doctors. To create one viral Instagram or TikTok video might take you hours, right? But you spend an hour with us, we'll give you 20 to 30 great pieces of content that you can use not just to educate your own patients, but to educate the global audience. And Roon is in over 100 countries now today. I think the second aspect of the why now is that the problem of misinformation, disinformation, and trust has gotten exponentially worse in the last 10 or 15 years.
There was something that happened 5 years ago that may have played into that. I can't think what it was.
I have no comment there either. But we look at the measles, what's going on with measles today, right? Like measles, why are we talking about measles in 2025? This should not be a problem. And yet, just because we have, sadly, someone at the very top of our political food chain talking about not getting vaccinated or taking cod liver oil, et cetera, we have measles outbreaks, right? There's someone on the train here in New York who had measles. And so there's, I think, an understanding that you can't be passive if you want to educate the public at large when it comes to health information. Vivek Murthy, our Surgeon General, has talked about how, our former Surgeon General has talked about how public health misinformation is one of the big public health problems. And so I think doctors have woken up to the fact that we have to be active. You can't fight misinformation with a flood of misinformation with raindrops. You need to fight fire with fire. And so that's what we help them do.
Just the one thing to add there, the other fascinating thing that's happened is, every platform kind of birds a base of creators that didn't exist before, whether TikTok dancers, whether for Pinterest, it was early lifestyle bloggers. I think in medicine, there's a whole generation of doctors who have grown up actually with Instagram, with TikTok, seeing these platforms as consumer platforms, seeing the pandemic and seeing kind of some of their peers step up and actually teach and educate at scale. And I think this is definitely a post-pandemic company where it used to be like, oh, a doctor won't get on a camera and won't create content. And because it feels completely antithetical to like inpatient care. But so many amazing physicians started doing it at scale, whether it's Bob Wachter, at UCSF, Vin Gupta, all the way up to the US Surgeon General, that you started seeing these models of just both great doctors and everyday doctors do this very easily. And so it's been amazing to just see the interest from just young physicians who feel that actually public education is part of their kind of moral obligation. And we want to kind of capture that energy and be a place that celebrates and honors them.
I mean, that's great. And I actually, I always felt that as one of these very early healthcare bloggers, but I'm obviously a politics, business, tech guy, not a medical, clinical person, that this, the blog and social media gave the opportunity for so many doctors to do one-to-many broadcasting as opposed to the one-to-one they do every day in their offices with their patients. And it never really took off on those medium. And I don't know whether it's because, it was too hard, too complex. I don't know. I got the impression there was concerns about, there were concerns about sort of going outside your lane and possibly upsetting the, your employer, your host institution. Obviously, most doctors now have an employer. So, and there's a whole bunch of stuff there, which I'd love to get into a bit as we get into this, as to, how did you encourage the first, I don't know how many doctors you have on the platform now, but you obviously relatively early on, and you have many more, but how did you encourage that first group to get on? And how do you sort of protect them from these, all those reasons why they, perhaps may have felt nervous about going onto a platform like this before?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll start. I think again, just relative to where, as Vikram said, as a post-pandemic company, so many doctors were suddenly on Twitter, right? Before it was X. Bob Wachter, who's one of our great docs on Roon, chair of medicine at UCSF, had an amazing Twitter presence where he was talking, I'm sure you saw daily, weekly, about his assessment of risk,
Yeah,
and
I'm still not over the fact that he only had like a half a paragraph about me in his book, and he went down the streets of the Rock Elf people and had like 3 pages, and they had a photo and stuff, and we're still having words about that every time we see each other. But
all right, good, good,
you're
good.
right. I mean, he did an amazing job, as had Eric Topol and many others.
Exactly.
But I
Right.
would say that those are kind of like the superstar, well-known
Yeah.
doctors and everything who who have kind of a public presence. I think what you're doing a lot more, and perhaps you can, I don't want to interrupt you, is to say that there's the sort of layer down of people who have incredible skills and incredible knowledge and are, working like you are around at the height of your profession, but that knowledge just doesn't, there's not an easy way for that knowledge to come out to everyday patients.
Yeah, exactly. And I think so many of the early people that came to Roon, it was a very multidisciplinary effort. We started, our first condition was GBM, so it was neurosurgeons, neuro-oncologists, social workers, PTOT, speech, finance, and legal. Really anyone that had expertise to share. And so what we found is that people love getting together and sharing information and connecting and educating at scale. Like all these people were from around the country. And we used to have like these GBM Thursdays where people would come at 5 o'clock. And if you've ever tried to herd doctors into a meeting, even at the same institution, getting calendars together is incredibly hard. But people will make time for things that they're interested in. And so we saw from there and even till now that people are really love being part of technology and like providing value in a way that's like very easy, to so many people, including their own patients. We find that people have automatically started using Roon in their own offices. They'll put Roon in the AVS, and we see that at multiple institutions now, big academic medical institutions where both before the visit, after the visit, they're saying, hey, you can supplement your learning with on Roon, and you'll find me there, right? Because it's great to see great doctors on Roon writ large, but it's also great to see your own doctor. And I think that engagement and education people are getting, our doctors are saying the visits are just better quality time with the patients, right? It's less time spent on kind of re-educating or on basic things. They can get really into the meat of the matter. So I think convincing people in the post-pandemic stage or era was actually it wasn't that hard. People wanted this to exist. And so thankfully, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of doctors later, there's a lot of social proof that this is the platform to do it on.
So the goal is I'm a consumer. I come to Roon. I may have been told to go on by my own doctor. I may have been, just got there from whatever reason. Or I assume your SEO work is from Vikram, from your perspective, is continuing apace. But I mean, so why don't you show me, Vikram, go into the application and show me what the experience is like for people who haven't seen it. And give us an idea of the range of the sort of questions and the subjects that you're currently working on, and kind of the corpus of knowledge that you've built so far, and how you're bringing that out.
So what I'm showing you here, so Roon, there's a mobile app and there's a web optimized, there's a desktop optimized website. And so I'm showing you the app on web and on desktop. This is roon.com. And we work on, we started in ALS and GBM, but we work on a whole range of different health areas. What I'm showing you right now is actually the app for people navigating fertility and family building. And so everything we do centers on the expert. And so if you come to the service, one of the first places you will be taken to is the range of different experts who create content, and in this case, answer short form video Q&A. You can see an expert. This is Dr. Amanda Adelaide. You can see all her answers to her most common questions, whether it's, what's the best piece of advice for someone starting their fertility journey? How do I choose a fertility clinic? And it's all short videos with...
How do I choose a fertility clinic? I think there are a number of things to think about. Number one, the most important is going to be, how do you feel when you're in that clinic? Not just with your potential doctor, but also with this.
Yeah, so this is an example of Amanda answering this question. It's a very complex question loaded with this is a big decision. Looking into the camera, like you're almost like FaceTiming her. And you get the answer to that question, but you also see other questions that are similar. Like Amanda, there's a range of different providers. In the case of fertility and family building, the specialties that matter are reproductive endocrinology, high-risk OB, we have embryologists, genetic counselors, and all of these experts are from the leading academic hospitals as well as fertility clinics. They all have been vetted by us. We look for people that are the kind of overlapping Venn diagram of very credentials and great communicators. When people do this and we get a bunch of experts who create content, they give us all of these answers. We then organize these answers into topics. And so if you're a user, you can come here and browse a range of different topics. These topics map back to kind of the patient journey, the most common places that you might look. Most people don't know what they don't know when they navigate a new health area. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about the map, so to speak, of, if you're in IVF, for instance, this is broken down by step because IVF is very linear. What are all the different steps? And under each of these, we have collections of questions from this different multidisciplinary.
Oh, I see. So that would then get you back to the expert. So you can get to the sort of the exploration of the
And
map.
people love this idea of like
Right.
multiple perspectives. And
Yeah.
so
some questions.
Whenever we ask a question, you'll get lived experience experts, and then you might also get, someone who's a medical expert. And so we combine the lived experience with the medical, because health tends to be practical, social, emotional. And so people love this idea of just being able to learn in a very human way by seeing expert-driven answers. It's short, it's digestible. You don't have to read, a long article or listen to a webinar. And then if you have a question, many people don't know what they don't know, and they are in the kind of browsing, learning. I'm looking at both either people who are experts or topics. But if you have a question that is top of mind, you can come here and ask it. I'm using a predefined question here. Roon is giving you an instant answer. It's pulling from our corpus of information. So this is an AI feature that summarizes basically what we have on our corpus. So it doesn't pull from like the web at large. And so people love this idea of it's a finite amount of knowledge. It's all expert driven. And I can both read and actually look at the sources of the information. So in this case, This is Dr. Randy Goldman, who's another reproductive endocrinologist. Um, and well, that's Randy there. This is Dana McQueen. And I can also see questions that are related to this question. So if I ask that question, what question should I ask my fertility doctor about egg freezing is a logical next question.
So,
And
so in the case
okay.
here, you're taking this is, I assume, this is AI going and essentially summarizing from the transcript of the answers that these doctors or experts are given. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
exactly. Yeah.
Right.
I
So
see.
if you think of health journeys, most people are like, hey, I just landed in this new city. It's a city without a map. Teach me what I should know. So you can browse. Who are the experts? I want to know them from people. And, very often people like certain people. They're like, hey, I actually want this information, but I want it from Dr. Randy Goldman. She communicates in a way that is like, perfect with how I think about bedside manner. And then if I have a burning question, many of these health conditions we work on, there's a lot happening outside of a clinic, and your next appointment with an REI might be in 4 months. There's only like 1,800 REIs in the country, and 1 in 6, couples navigate infertility. You can come here and ask a question and get an instant answer. I want to show you also the dementia app, just so
Just
you.
go back for a second. How many areas have you built out so far? These are the ones you built out so far. Click on that link again.
Today, Roon focuses on, ALS and GBM is where we started, dementia, which was our next condition. And then we're in the process of launching Roon for a range of different women's health conditions and women's health areas. And so PCOS, endometriosis, perimenopause and menopause, and then fertility and family building. And
So
so,
I assume there's a ton more here that you're going to, on the
exactly.
roadmap.
Yeah,
I
so
did
we're just
notice
in.
diabetes, cardiology, whatever, but
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. The goal is
yeah.
to
I think
do 200 plus over the next 18 months. Go ahead, Rohan.
I think one thing to add on the instant answer question is that it is really fascinating when you look at our data about what questions people are actually asking us. People, once they start using Rune, are literally telling us their life story and want help and talk to us like we're their doctor, right? And I think getting immense value, even though we're not providing direct medical advice, getting immense value from the service and from the types of questions that we're offering, because we're not just talking about anodyne, superficial answers to questions. We get very deep into every condition. We can go both broad and very deep into every condition we touch. And because we're getting multiple perspectives on any question for which there should be multiple perspectives, we get that nuance, right? The nuance in medicine, because most medicine's not governed by phase 3 clinical trials. It's mostly in the gray. And so you can see how leading experts may differ slightly on important questions when it comes to the management of disease. And so I think that's been a real fascinating thing to do. And we actually, one of our things we'd love to do this year is publish, like thematic report about one of the first projects I want to do is, in the fertility space, is there a difference in terms of what the informational needs are in blue states versus red states nowadays, given the legal issues that are out there? And so those are lots of different interesting academic projects we can do, but it just shows you how the informational journey and the agency that people are looking for can be solved by expert guidance.
So going back just for a second to the, and if you want to show it again, Vikram, can you pull up go back to the thing, pull up an expert. I want to ask sort of how did this, so if I'm an OBGYN, how do I kind of qualify to get on the site? And then clearly you're depending on my expertise, yes, if I went to, if I'm at UCSF and I've done my residency medical school there, I'm probably pretty smart. And I'm probably fairly, mainstream and understand a bunch of stuff around this and probably have my expertise. And, you have Dr. Rowan's bio up here. But at some point, that these are her answers that she's given to these questions. We're going back to this conversation about misinformation. And you're grabbing from these answers for your I think you call it the Explore the answers to the text. What level of editorial are you doing, or are you just trusting the process? So how does she get there, or how does a doctor get on this system? And once they're on there, how are you making sure the
Go
quality
ahead,
of the
Ron.
information is as high as it ought to be if you've got UCSF doctors giving the answer?
Yeah. So we actually we source doctors in multiple ways. We actually are a very heavy medical team. We have a medical platform officer named Dr. Joshua Lang. He's a cardiologist that trained at the Brigham. We have uh, other doctors that trained at Oxford, for example. We have PAs on the team, and so we have lots of deep in-house medical talent, which is really great. And so we basically, whenever we launch a condition, really try and find who are the experts in the field, experts at academic medical institutions, people who see a large volume of patients in the condition we're going after, people who have published in that topic, and then um, who do those experts recommend once we talk to them, right? In terms of other people who can also contribute their expertise. And so we really evaluate and talk to everyone that's on the service before they're ever on the service in the first place. So that's the first thing. We do a lot of vetting. When they contribute answers to Roon, we actually quality check at every single aspect of the process. So some of it is technical, like is the audio and video good? Other aspects of it are how evergreen is this content? On one spectrum is why is the sky blue? You never really have to update that, right? On the other hand, what's the implications of this phase 1 clinical trial? Well, we know the phase 2 and the phase 3 will eventually come out, so we have to update that later. And so we have a rubric internally about how to go about updating things. And over time, that'll have more, as you can imagine, more technological sophistication using AI and other things. But yeah, we're quality and trust, or trust is the epicenter and the foundation of everything we do. And so quality is obviously a really important part of that.
Is that going to be manageable when you get to 200? I don't know how many doctors per specialty, but when you get to more and more doctors and more subspecialties, I mean, there's
Well,
obviously,
as it is,
non-trivial amount.
we have, like I said, hundreds and hundreds of doctors already. We have more than 20,000 videos as it is. So we have a good system that works in terms of quality control.
And then the other thing is, so right, I'm the world's leading expert on ABC. What's in it for me to come on Roon? Am I getting paid? Am I getting just doing this for the good of humanity? Am I there's obviously a lot of people contributing. Like if you become a TikTok star, you can make some money. Admittedly, you're probably doing dancing or whatever, but not doing medical knowledge. But what's the incentive for those doctors to come onto Roon?
Yeah, I can start. So I think the incentive structure is multiple. I think the first thing is most doctors don't need influencer dollars, to do this. That's not going to
Because
be
you're telling me we're paying our neurosurgeons enough as it is. We don't.
So yeah, so I think that is not the motivating factor. I think when we first started, we did because we value doctors' time. Doctors, you have to understand, doctors are constantly asked to
Sure.
do things for free, right? For their hospital system, for whoever. And we recognize that doctors are, they're time famished, et cetera. And so we want to respect their time. So, at the beginning days, we certainly offered an honorarium. It's not nearly as much as they might get paid in the open market from a pharmaceutical company, but enough to say that, hey, um, we respect you, and that kind of thing. And so that's not the draw, though. The draw is that I'm creating this profile that I can educate my own patients with at scale, that I can keep using again and again. We're not entertainment, so it's not a question of volume of content, right? Where you're trying to populate a feed. Like once you create, like I created a surgery guide for my patients with glioblastoma. I don't have to keep updating that. It's like really good as it is. And so, yeah, when I have like a new idea or whatever, I can add to it. But, my basics of what to think about and do the day before surgery are unlikely to change for years, unless something new happens. So I think the ability to educate your own patients and like make it easier in your own medical workflow has been a real draw. I think being part of this community of science communicators has been fun. I think people like this idea of collaborating with all these other doctors from all around the country that you might not ever meet. Being part of digital health company and a startup has been another reason. So it's many, many things. I wouldn't say it's one, but I think this idea of creating this new place where doctors share knowledge that doesn't exist today. If you think about it, where's the place that doctors share knowledge? with either each other or patients at scale. And so I think there's a lot of excitement around that. Vikram, would you add anything?
Yeah, I think for me, the most, again, not coming from the medical world, I used to always watch Khan Academy talks, right?
Right.
Aman Khan, the famous teacher. And, if you think of the archetype of someone who like loves teaching, and I had that kind of like data point in my head. And then I always had specific doctor friends in my life who were just amazing at Rohan being one of them, right? Like amazing teachers. Like you ask a hard question, Rohan might start with like, hey, here's how the brain works. And I knew these people existed, which is like they're just exceptional teachers. Uh, and what's very heartening for me to see is most of the people who come to the service, their eyes light up because they like self-identify as one of those people. But in everyday kind of clinical work, the teaching part gets kind of underinvested, right? You have 15 minutes to see someone and you're like just so focused on the next patient. In fact, some of the ALS doctors tell us they have like 12 minutes to communicate a death sentence as a diagnosis. And then where does all that stuff around teaching go? And so I think we've tapped into like a certain archetype of the doctor teacher, the doctor explainer. It's not all doctors, but I think that's what makes it special. It's like a kind of elite community of someone that like when they see us and we see them, they're like, oh, I do this every day. I'm drawing the left ventricle when my patient comes in, and asks me about the heart. And that's and we're building around this like very special community.
So the obvious answer is as you grow in general, specialties, doctors, the rest of it, is this going to become a thing where you hope every doctor eventually will be on the platform? Because I, as a doctor, even if I'm not a Harvard or Columbia or whatever doctor, but I'm out there in the community, but I want to use this to communicate with my patients, or are you going to limit it to quote
Yeah,
unquote
I think
the elite expert?
this is a really good question. I think there's, like all good creator networks, like 10% of the people create 90% of the
Sure.
value in the content. And so we have a whole roadmap around what are all the other ways in which you can engage a doctor and make it useful for them without them having to create. And so the goal is to get every provider on the service, but then not everyone necessarily has to be a creator. And we're mapping out kind of all the different ways in which you can share, curate, and be part of an ecosystem.
So I think that kind of leads to to a fork, right? The one fork is while this is going on, well, if you could take all the knowledge from all the best doctors, all the leading medical establishments in the country, the Mayos, the Stanfords, or whatever, and publish it, in the way you're doing that's great. You got two things going on. One is that you've got a bunch I mentioned earlier. You've got a bunch of organizations, for-profit organizations who are currently either using medical information, transmitting it to doctors, or using medical information and transmitting it via or AI tools which are going in and looking at medical information, and that's becoming very accessible to patients as well, as you know. So I'm kind of interested in how you're thinking about the sort of the difference between patients going looking for AI based stuff, which there are a lot of aggressive patients talking about already. There are a lot of very aggressive forward thinking patients in those patient chat rooms and what have you you've been talking about, even if they have run the risk of being bamboozled with medical misinformation, all the rest of it. So how do you think about that? And on the other hand, you've got the world where, yes, it's great that somebody from Columbia or UCSF or whatever can do this, but increasingly those organizations are being much more sort of aware of their own brand and their relationship with their doctors. So I don't know if Mayo has decided that, Mayo doctors can only participate in the Mayo forum versus, coming onto Roon. So how do you think about these two sort of dichotomy things going on, where you've got sort of the corporatization of medicine on the one hand, and then sort of the easy access of data and very smart, intelligent agents on the other?
Yeah, I can take the agent question, and Rowan, I don't know if you want to answer the
Yeah.
other one, but on the agent side, it's so just two thoughts. So one is obviously like ChatGPT is exceptional.
Right.
Uh, and there's just like it used to be that, oh, like ChatGPT hallucinates, and like there's kind of this this idea that like ChatGPT gets like lots of fundamental stuff wrong. But I think it would be foolish to pretend that it's not getting better and it's quite excellent. And I think that said, there's a kind of specific type of way in which content is delivered, which is it's text-based. It's very kind of like discrete. And we believe that, when you're in a really hard place, there's nothing that can replace, a doctor answering some of the most complex questions. My mom recently had a stroke, a very crazy subarachnoid brain hemorrhage. I was on ChatGPT all day, right? But I understanding like the basics. But when it came to like how do we think about care? What are the hard questions? How do you navigate the condition? There was Andy at UCSF, and like I didn't want anyone else because his bedside manner, the nuance in which he was communicating, the kind of meta question about like how you think about navigating this, in a deeper human way is something that I just didn't get from ChatGPT. And so I think there's going to be infinite AI generated like text on text, but there'll be a flight to quality. And I think people will always crave, the human face that can like actually navigate. Health is so human. But on things that are like, what are the most common symptoms? Things are very deterministic. I think AI will do a far better job than any doctor. And I think on things that are complex and nuanced, we're betting that like the best medical experts collectively, will rise to the occasion. So
I think the additional thing is, and I'm sure you've seen this, that so much of, 30, 40, 50% of medical decision making are based on factors that are not captured in a EHR. They're cultural, they're contextual, they're social determinants of health, et cetera, that like may influence how a doctor might, counsel or guide a patient, right? And I think I'm not worried in the short or even medium term that AI is going to capture all of that because it doesn't have the data to do that, right? Even in our EHR, we don't type everything that we're thinking, right? It's sort of like type the minimum to generate the bill that you need, right? That is like the main thing that Epic does. It's a billing machine more than a documentation machine. And I think the ability to capture nuance, as Vikram said, the ability to use AI to amplify human expertise is something that we're betting will be the differentiating thing. Because in a world of infinite information and infinite text, does that really comfort you? I think most people don't find comfort in it. I think what people do find comfort in is like that human, that expert, that doctor looking at you and saying that this is how I think about this problem. And I think, based on our user feedback, et cetera, I think we're on the right track, but you have to take our word for it.
Okay. And then tell me about sort of the Roon versus the big brand names in healthcare piece that you currently have obviously a number of doctors from those brands. And I'm just wondering, are they thinking that, this that a Mayo doctor should be talking to a Mayo Clinic on an audience on a Mayo Clinic channel, or are they, do you think there's an issue there, or am I making that one up?
yeah, I think actually, Rohan, you take this and I'll build on it.
Yeah, I think there's most health institutions understand they need a broad multi-channel strategy to reach patients. And, keyword buys on Google are much less effective than they were even
Sure.
5 years ago, right? And so what is the best way of demonstrating your key asset as a health institution? It's your doctors, right? It's not the MRI machine. No one cares. It's like the quality of your doctors. And the beauty is when you see a doctor on Roon, for example, explaining their domain expertise, there's no better brand campaign or marketing asset than that, right? Because it's actually quite a good proxy for expertise. If you can't explain, or I should say, if you are an amazing communicator about your craft, both at the general and the specific, the broad and the deep, it's very likely, at least in my experience, that you're quite a good doctor also, and craftsman or craftswoman in your field. So I think the people see Roon, all different health systems that we've talked to, as an amazing way of getting their doctors out there.
So they view you as at the moment as good free publicity, and it's not as
It's
compromised
basically a free brand because the profiles get SEO optimized.
Right.
When someone is in that, I'm searching, I'm information seeking, a world expert from a clinic is showing up. And so actually hospital systems would rather have their doctors be in places where they're not showing up, than in kind of a echo chamber. So
No, I think it's very interesting, right? The whole concept of how people are distributing, a product like medical care, especially now something that can be delivered at a distance. Which gets me to the sort of the nitty-gritty. Okay, so you guys raised 15 million in a Series A. I think you'd raised a bit of money before that as well. Is that right?
Yeah, we did a seed round before that. Yeah.
So, you raised a bit of money. This involves ugly venture capitalists coming into the room, and one day they're going to ask you, how you're going to make some money and give it back. So, I could see a number of possibilities, including, obviously connecting directly to the doctors and getting involved in that sort of flow and potentially delivering care that way. Obviously, there's advertising, but you've got a basic direct to consumer product rather than direct to physician product, which sort of changes the world of that. So, what's the basic and obviously put in the thing that Silicon Valley forever has had this idea, well, we can get a lot of people on our system and then we'll figure out how to make money. The sort of Sheryl Sandberg concept of, we'll ride the Facebook rocket ship and then figure out how to make money out of it later. And they did. So, but what's your sense of what the monetization and what the sort of financial strategy for Roon is going to be?
Yeah, I think I'll start by just saying we have sort of like one guiding principle around our business model, which is, initially when we started, it was very tempting to say like a lot of health companies try to charge people directly because selling to payers, selling to companies, there's just so much complexity in getting someone else. And so there's a kind of charge people directly model. I think because we are in the information business and information should be free and accessible almost by definition, we started with like putting free/freemium as like the North Star, which is like, how do we get this as accessible to as many people and then work backwards? And then the business model that we've been kind of excited to pursue and where we've seen a lot of interest is just in terms of sponsorships and both from, hospital systems as well as life science companies. And so the path that we are exploring is, a freemium business model with most of the app free, and then some parts out of like subsidized through sponsorships. And we also have seen kind of just so much of user feedback, and I guess there's so many user requests for very specific features that people want as they navigate a health journey. And so like Duolingo or like a lot of other services where most of the app is free, but there are value-added services. If we ever charge you, it'll never be for information, but it will be for, something that users have a lot of value around. A classic example could be, digital note-taking. If you're using the Roon app in a clinic setting and you want to save your notes and actually see common questions related to your last patient visit. I'm just making that as a theoretical example, but that's an example of, a value-added service. And so that's been that's what we've communicated both internally as well as to our investors, and the business models, as pharma advertising is very large. Lots of pharmaceutical companies are looking for just like other ways to connect with consumers. And then, companies like Doximity have just built very, robust businesses on the doctor side. But again, I think like the first principles approach here, which is, trust is at the center of the brand, access is at the center of the brand. And so we would never do anything that compromises kind of trust and access. And it's hard to get it right, I think, as you know, in healthcare. It's very hard to get all of the stars to align, but we're pretty idealistic, and I think because there's so much of value on the user side, we feel we'll be able to pull it off. So
yeah, I would say that, the obvious thing is what Rohan said earlier, right? You've got an editorial team there, and essentially this is a completely traditional, old style New York Times newspaper model. We have content and generated content from experts, and that's got to be good. And then you have advertising/sponsorship, which stays off to the side but pays the bills. And it seems to me that where people got into trouble is where those two lines are crossed, right? And I think you're seeing a lot of, if you want to go back to to pick on somebody WebMD, seems to be at the point that you can't tell where one starts and where one stops, and that's, I think, lost a lot of the trust. And I think you really have to be very careful about that. Having said that, I suspect that if you did cross that line, you would start losing your main content producers anyway, pretty quickly. So that would be it's probably a self tailspin if you go down that path and get it wrong. But there are plenty of examples of how you can get it right, and I think people are accepting of the. I'll put up with seeing the Mayo
And just
Clinic.
we're like probably the most intentional, thoughtful group in healthcare because we come from outside of healthcare. So we're just starting with like trust and access is the key. How do we kind of keep that above everything else, you know? So
That's great. So let's talk about the future. You've got, I think, you said several hundred docs on the platform and others. I mean, you have patient advocates and people who've been through the experience and that stuff as well. And obviously, you're going to grow that, and presumably there are plenty more subdivisions of the four or five, the 8 or 9 categories you currently have. If I come back in, a year and a half's time, we do this again. How many categories do you think you'll have? What's the sense of, how many clinicians have on the platform? What does good look like in terms of sort of growing it out and in terms of user numbers?
On the medical side, Vikram could speak to the user side, but on the medical side, we hope to have between 150 and 200 new conditions in the next roughly 18 months.
That's quite a lot of work, right? You've got, I said, nine or 10 now, you said. So
I mean,
I think another couple of hundred. Not trivial.
I think you'll see, in the next 2 months, actually, a huge uptick in the number that we launch in little batches, and that batch strategy works really well. It turns out, for example, I can talk about lots of other things besides brain tumors as a trained neurosurgeon, right? And so lots of doctors have the ability to talk about many diseases, right? That's part of medicine. And so that ability to quickly expand your portfolio, so to speak, on Roon is naturally inbuilt into the system. And so, we're pretty bullish on our ability to kind of do that. And, we have, hundreds of meetings a month with doctors nowadays, inviting them and pitching them and getting them onto Roon. And, almost invariably they say yes, and so that's been a really great in terms of doctor market fit. I mean, I can't imagine that, if that was ever a phrase, then I think we definitely have it. And so that's been really exciting to see. Vikram on the
Vikram, on the user side, how are you going to get the users, and what in a world in which there's incredible incredible money spent
I think
to access these types of patients?
Just because each of like even just working on dementia, there's millions of people who navigate dementia. This is a free app that literally guides you on some of the hardest questions. And so when people find us, there's this kind of moment of like, why didn't I find this sooner? And there's just so much stickiness with the product that, based on where we're growing, I mean, our goals have millions of people using the service the next time you see us. And I think what's exciting is with each launch, it opens up the opportunity to attract more people. And so with all the investments we're making in the product, the scale at which we're launching, I think, the goal is to have millions of users use the product, and not just for very hard health journeys like where we started, but we imagine kind of even a lifestyle, kind of a life cycle consumer that comes in maybe for fertility, but then is like, we're launching pregnancy in a few months, pediatrics. And so I think we'll have lots of users who see Roon as their guide for health beyond just something that's more episodic.
And then final question on that is there a bigger play here, right? So if you've got a million, not hundreds of doctors in pre-conditions doing that, there's a lot of other needs that those doctors can take care of for the patients. Yes, they all currently have affiliations with this, that, and the other, but I mean, there are obviously a lot of other people delivering services online. Do you think that there is a place where Roon becomes more than just a content company? And starts delivering a bunch of other services, or do you think that's all taken care of and you're better off staying away from that and just sort of being this dominant content play?
Yeah, I think the way we think of it's interesting you said that, because almost everyone who uses the app, the number one request is like, I want Roon to assist me more, and I'm already here, please assist, and I'm paraphrasing all our like hundreds of user researchers. And so people actually think about it as an assistive tool, not just a information tool. And we have a robust kind of roadmap around assistance. And assistance can mean anything from guiding you to like deeper integration with your healthcare services. And so we definitely see ourselves, way beyond kind of the information journey. And it's where we started, because I think you have to earn the right and the trust around being the best place online. Like the digital front door for health is, many people have tried to like build that, but we're actually trying to do it. So, Rohan?
Yeah, and it's a tricky one, right? Again, because there's so much that you could get wrong in doing this, and there's so much opportunity in just doing the content side. But yeah, I mean, every time I've had a health journey, it's great to learn something, but it wouldn't be nice to to go to somebody who looks like they know what they're talking about and trustworthy, and I can get access to, who could actually like help me with whatever the next thing I actually need to do,
Yeah, what's
which
the next
usually
step?
involves seeing somebody being prodded, getting a pill, something, right? So
Yeah, I think
it's a tricky.
there's so much friction in healthcare. Healthcare is not easy at all, right? And, even most of my friends, maybe the reason they keep me around as a friend is I'm a doctor and I can help guide them into
Of course, you thought that
the
before it was your
dizziness.
good looks. Come on.
And so the dizzying maze of healthcare, that seems to be my biggest value add as their friend. And so what if you don't have a doctor friend, right? Like it's misery, I would say, for so many people. And I think given that level of friction in healthcare, and you think of the, eventual hopeful, and we'll get there, scale of Roon, how can we use that scale of Roon to help reduce, to make, you don't want to use the word delightful in healthcare, but like how can you make the experience of healthcare, that much easier so that you're actually focusing on your health and less so on the nonsense that surrounds healthcare. And so just, that's very broad and vague and whatever, but I think that is, one of the powerful opportunities we'll have if we get this, our education and our guidance and our information right. I think we'll have that opportunity at scale.
Yeah, I think it's a great place to end, and that's that's something that I talk about this, and I've written about this ad nauseum about the pain and suffering involved in when you have pain and suffering of getting to the right place and figuring out the right people and getting access to them and figuring out what it is and what it shouldn't be and how bloody awful most medical research is and et cetera, et cetera. So once you get past all that, you can see that you have this massive. Once you get the whole content thing up and running, you have this massive opportunity. Of course, you've got to be super careful because there are lots. It's a very big and thorny beast. This whole healthcare system that you're working on. Right. That's my commentary, but I wish you both lots of luck as you're doing this. All right. I've been speaking with Rohan Ramakrishna. He is the Chief Medical Officer, and Vikram Bhaskaran. He is the CEO of Roon. Gents, thanks for your time. Thanks for showing me what Roon was like, and I'll come back and visit with you soon.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for having us.